Facilities that make this program possible are provided by the City of Highland Park. Programs are produced independently by members of the community. The City of Highland Park is not affiliated with the following program or the producers of public access programming and is not responsible for the content. The following program does not reflect the opinions of the City of Highland Park.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Dotson. I'm the program coordinator and founder of Highland Park Poetry and your host for Poetry Today. I have two special guests with me, Marjorie Rissman and Carrie Leaf. Marjorie has lived in Highland Park since 1977 and has been a real estate broker since 1985. For the past 6 years, she has resumed her love of writing and has been active with Highland Park Poetry, Deerfield Library Poets, Poets and Patrons, and the Illinois State Poetry Society. Her poems have been published online, in East on Central, and in many chapbooks. Carrie Leaf is a passionate writer and poet who loves Highland Park sculptures, ravines, beaches, music, artwork, and imagination. When she's not working at her day job, you can see Carrie walking her best dog, Louie, both of them looking for good conversation. Carrie has lived in Highland Park since 1987 with her husband and children, where she has long delighted in working for community organizations like Yay Highland Park that support youth, education, the arts, and social services. Well, the reason for our program today is I wanted to have the opportunity to talk about this summer's Highland Park poetry contest about public art in Highland Park. Highland Park has a very rich, diverse collection of public art, almost 30 pieces throughout the city, both in the parks, on the trails, in the downtown streets, everywhere. And so the challenge was to get writers to go on a treasure hunt, as it were. We provided the map and get you all inspired by the various artwork and then have you write poetry about it. And the judging was done by a guest judge, Sue Roop, in Wisconsin. And she didn't know who wrote any of the poems. As it turned out, she loved you guys. She thought you guys were great because she selected multiple poems of yours. And I'd say, well, let's just dive right into the poetry. Marjorie, if you would start with this poem, which people can see on next to the artwork. This one's Treehouse Dreams.
Right.
And go ahead and take it away, Marjorie.
Treehouse Dreams. Come sit inside the treehouse and dream of all your dreams. Come sit inside the treehouse and dream of silver beams. And if you have a book to read or a blanket now to knit, there is a bench of hardy stone on which to dream and sit. First dry off morning dewdrops, then dust off spider's bed. Set up your picnic lunch there, call the fairies to be fed. Pour nectar into goblets, let the robins take a sip, and when they finish drinking, let the cardinals take a dip. Come sit inside the treehouse and share it with the squirrels to watch the stars rise gently like a strand of cosmic pearls.
All right, I love it. It's great. But talk about journey of discovery to find the sculpture. It was challenging. I don't know, did you have a hard time?
I asked.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's tucked in the woods behind the main building at Heller Nature Center.
Okay.
And I remembered it being at Heller Nature, but I thought it was to the right of the building in a different woods. So I went there first, couldn't find it, and went inside the building to find out. And then the nice lady behind the desk showed it to me through the window.
Oh, perfect.
And then
okay.
opened the door so I could go out the back way.
Oh, great. Well, I went on a Sunday when they were closed because my husband and I we were trying to make sure that for the website that we had photographs of all the artwork. And we couldn't find it. We were walking on trails. We walked everywhere, but we did not come across it. And finally, I just said, hey, maybe you might want to send me a photo of the sculpture. I know what it looks like, but if you could send. So they sent me one of their photos that we use in the book. So. But what attracted you, Carrie? What attracted you to your artworks?
I walk by a lot of those particular sculptures almost every day.
Okay.
And, I look at them in passing, but this challenge actually was inspiring because I decided to look at them through different eyes. The pipe sculpture, for example, by the library, everybody calls it the pipe sculpture. I've seen it, I've seen kids playing on it, but I've never really taken it very seriously. And this gave me an opportunity to look at it differently. I took a photo myself. I started thinking about it, and it really did inspire me.
Oh, great.
So now when I walk by, I think of it very differently from how I thought of it before. So thank you for
right.
giving me that.
Okay. Well, since you talked about that sculpture, why don't you go ahead and read that poem for us?
Sure. We start alone at life's one end and stretch and reach and wander. We climb, rappel, pull, tug, scrape by, seek answers as we ponder. We intersect in life.com, entangled as we grasp. We swirl and dance, spin, sing, and mesh, kiss, fondle, scream, and gasp. The swirly, bumpy, messy ride envelops us in curves. We ven, in, out, and then unfurl. Our former path then swerves. And as we lean, we glide, we slide, and head down homeward bound, alone again to face night's end, to bask in shadow's sound.
Wow, that's great. It's interesting to point out that on the map and I think on the city's website about it, the sculpture is referred to as Untitled by Peter Vokus. However, those of us in the know that the sculptor did give it a name, Miss Nitro, which was, I believe, the name of an exotic dancer at a club in the area, which may be why it's called Untitled. I don't know.
Maybe I need to write another poem now.
No, your poem was great. It was great. But that's the part of the point, I think, was to also, like passersby, you say you walk by that artwork all the time. The idea was to get people who would read the poems to stop and maybe experience it in a new way, seeing it through your eyes, a new perspective on it, and maybe seeing it perhaps for the first time, because oftentimes we just kind of walk by, we don't.
Absolutely.
Marjorie, talk to me about some of your experience on this.
Well, this particular one is at the nature center, and I knew that a lot of kids run around there and play and do all kinds of things, and that the fall festival was coming. So I kind of geared this poem more to children than to adults. But interestingly enough, both Carrie and I ended our poems with night.
Oh, wow.
An image of nighttime. So we start with day and end with night. And that was that. The other poems that I wrote, well, there's Galloping Ghosts of Fort Sheridan.
Okay.
I live near Fort Sheridan, not in the fort, and that's the town of Fort Sheridan now because it's no longer a fort. But I have seen this sculpture many times, both as a realtor showing houses, but also because it's been there for longer than the fort was a housing development. And have always admired the horse. Wasn't crazy ever about this short little guy on the horse who I knew nothing about, not being a student of generals, but the horse was beautiful, and I love the fact that it was in movement. So I always appreciated the sculptor's work because horses are very hard both to draw and to capture. And so when I saw that it was one of the pieces of art in the contest, I decided that was the first one I had to write, was my my story about the horse and the rider. So I cheated a little bit. I did do some historical inquiry into Philip Sheridan because I knew nothing about him.
That's not cheating, that's research.
Well, okay.
That's totally legit.
And I learned more than I needed to know about him, but he was a very interesting man, and we shared something in common, and that's that we're both short, and that the likeness of the rider on the horse was very much in keeping with how he was physically in real life. So it wasn't an exaggeration to put a dwarfed man on this great big horse. He was very small for even those times. So I really enjoyed the project and learning about Philip Sheridan, General, and found out that he saved the city of Chicago after the fire. He was called in by the mayor of Chicago to help keep the city safe. So he brought soldiers down to the city so that there wouldn't be looting and further destruction, and helped people in distress, take things out of their homes that were burnt and stuff, and did a remarkable job there. And then he went on later to, with a group of very important people, to save Yellowstone from development and to earmark it as a national park. And that was the beginning of the national park movement, along with Teddy Roosevelt's interest in developing them.
So it's interesting that you said you were drawn to the sculpture because of the movement and the motion. That's part of what I was drawn to in Harbor Seal, in a more whimsical way. But I loved the fact of the fountain aspect of the sculpture,
right.
and the movement of the water and the playfulness of it. And that's another sculpture, like the treehouse dreams, that you have to really look for.
Yeah.
It's really hidden away in the back of the library, down a few steps, and a lot of people never seem to find it.
Yeah.
But I had seen the photo of it and thought,
Okay.
I know I've seen, it's familiar, and made a point of going there.
Wow.
And in fact, when I first looked at it, the water was not coming out.
Okay.
But I knew there was water from that fountain, and I could visualize it. And it made me realize that sculptures themselves, as far as I'm concerned, are poems. They are poems. They don't give us the words, but they can provide us with the imagination for words. And
Yes.
recently I was in New York on September 11th, and I went to see the 9/11 Memorial.
Oh, wow.
And that is, if you've not seen it, 2 large fountain sculptures, and they are amazing. Talk about motion. And I was lucky enough to hear the architect talk about his process.
Oh, yeah.
And all about it. And he said he had heard something with me and my poetry in the meeting. And he said, I'm not a poet, so I can't express myself in poetry, but I express it through my architecture.
Okay.
And I took him aside later and said, that memorial is a poem.
Oh, wow.
And you are a poet. And that's, but water and movement and sculptures that have movement, I think, really draw people in.
Yes. Yes. Well, since this program is for October, let's start with the Galloping Ghosts. If you would be kind enough, Marjorie,
sure.
to read Galloping Ghosts for General Sheridan.
Galloping Ghosts of Fort Sheridan. If you listen closely, you can hear sounds of hoofbeats galloping on parade grounds, to drummers beat and see horses strutting in formation, soldiers everywhere in rows, marching in uniform, eyes right, precision, the order of the day. There is General Sheridan, astride his horse Rienzi, the brass and bronze, aged by weather to a sickeningly grayish green, with no one left to command, ready to trot around the parade grounds to rouse up one last platoon and signal one last victory for the good of the Union, the good of Chicago, hero of the Civil War, and much more. After the Great Fire, He rescued Chicago from panic and destruction, from thieves and even insurrection to help rebuild. No wonder this statue was commissioned to honor 100 years and the namesake of the Army's home, not long before the base was closed to all but upscale homebuyers who love to live among the galloping ghosts.
Very nice.
Excellent. And speaking of harbor seal, we have a little, I don't know if this is like an original maquette. I don't think so. It's got some, I found this in the city manager's office at City Hall. So it says City of Highland Park 1990 Council Forum. So I don't know, it probably was just made as a replica, as a memento for, but anyway, it is of the sculpture.
I love it.
Right, okay.
I'll have to visit it in City Hall now as well.
But yes, please read what inspired you with Harbor Seal.
Okay, let's see. Harbor Seal. Frolic while you can, dear seal. Flip, swim, dive, take in sun. You'll live but 25 short years, so revel in seal fun. How dear you look, a pup indeed. Bald acrobatic feet. No one would guess that you prefer not vegetables, but meat. How did you land on Laurel Ave? What brought you to St. John's? You could be sailing in the seas, cavorting with sassy swans. Alas, that water spraying out adds to your playful air. Roly-poly on your back, you look like you don't care. But I know better, Harbor Seal. You harbor more than joy. You long to linger endlessly to play with girl and boy. Good news, dear seal, you're here to stay. Your future is not dark. You'll entertain and be adored by all in Highland Park.
That's great. Marjorie, you were also drawn to several sculptures. I guess Moraine Park, am I right?
Right.
Yeah, has tons of sculptures in there. I mean, that's like the largest concentration of the sculptures after the library. It's the largest concentration
Oh,
of,
is it really?
of sculptures, I think, in the whole collection. It's got, because it has the bench, it has the mysterious unnamed thing that you called schnoz. It's got winged hybrid. It's got a sculpture called the four-cornered plane in space, something like that. And then the Manuel Neri, Luca number 4. And then something called Equinox by Claire Lieberman. It's, anyway, so big concentration. It's kind of like, I mean, it is, everyone knows it is the dog park, but it's almost like Highland Park's version of a sculpture garden, I guess is what you would say, right?
I guess. Hopefully not too many dogs use it for other purposes.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
But actually, it's the beach is the dog park.
Right, yes.
So the dogs go down from the park to the beach and the lake.
Yeah.
And all I've seen are people looking
Walking
at the
around there.
sculptures.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about the other two sculptures and what inspired you with
Okay,
those.
well, the one that you were referring to, you were referring to two of them. I felt bad that so many of the poems, so many of the sculptures that we have are nameless and we don't even know who the artist was. So I don't know if they came out of the art center classes, perhaps, or were just left behind by careless home sellers.
Actually, if you go on, I didn't know it either, but I did find out recently on the city's website under the Cultural Arts Commission, they have actually a more interactive map that shows all the artwork, which has a little bit more information. And there seems to be one gentleman who donated the bench, that sculpture, and several others. But yes, so it wasn't just like hand-me-downs. They were actually, it was actually donated to the city.
Well, I felt bad that this poor sculpture had no parents or no one that would claim it. So would you like me to read it now?
Yes, please.
Okay, I call him the orphan because of that. He's nameless, without family, sad but proud. Not everybody gets to welcome park visitors until the gates are locked at dusk. But there he sits, among the trees, close to the road, tucked inside like a good luck charm, totem of tomorrow. At least he was viewed long enough to inspire a poet in the park who named him Schnoz, just because he needs a new one. And it is a face, it's hard to describe this sculpture. It's very small, sits close to the ground, and it's inside the sculpture itself is a kind of a scary little face, but with a great big nose. And so that's why I now call it Schnoz. So he's no longer nameless.
Okay.
Okay, so you'll
But
have
he's
to
still
put
an
up
orphan.
He's still an orphan.
And I hope he appreciates his new name.
Right.
Now, one thing I did want to point out about that is that I'm terrible with math, but so there were at least 28 sculptures that were part of the contest. And I gave the judge some discretion because I said, well, I got some extra money. I can afford to print X number of signs. So let's have some extra poems. I said, particularly if you find situations where you feel that you've got different perspectives, you're going to, so then talk about creating a dialogue with the artwork.
Right.
The reader gets to see two different poets' perspectives on the same piece. And so I was hoping that that would further engage people with the art and the poetry as well. So Schnoz, it's funny because you never know what judges are going to do. I am completely biased as the coordinator of the program, and I was anticipating, because we were just swamped with submissions about the antelope and about a sculpture called Compassion Moves the World, and about the sculpture about Balina Vallarta, the whales, tons and tons of poems. So I thought the judge is definitely going to pick, no. She just, she took my instruction about finding different perspectives and then made her choices. So ironically, the orphan has two poems. He may not have any parents, but he's got two poems.
That's great.
And so does my other poem.
Yes. Which, no, I'm like, what's the other poem that we haven't
The
read?
poem At the Dog Beach Park.
Yes.
That one
also-
has two,
right.
and talk about two totally different
Right.
concepts of that poem.
That was part of the fun of the whole contest, is being inspired by the sculptures and finding that the writing was so different one from the other.
Yeah.
When I wrote for Harbor Seal, it was light and happy, and then there were a couple of others that I wrote that had a much more serious air to them.
Well, actually, why don't we take a pause? This other poem that you brought, I asked you to bring it, wasn't actually selected by the judge.
Right.
But I liked it a lot, and it also
Thank
is you were brave enough to also try to talk about a sculpture that is not figurative.
Right.
So,
And actually, the name of the sculpture attracted me. The
Okay.
sculpture is called Differentiation, and as I stared at it, I thought, what was the sculptor trying to differentiate? So I, of course, gave it my own spin. But this one is called, not surprising, Differentiation. What makes you not me is your guttural laugh that bounces off leaves and echoes like ripples on the lake. What makes me not you are my carefully chosen words that soothe and cajole and nudge like a persistent pup's low growl. What makes you not me are your logical replies that slice through emotion and leave reason in fear's wake. What makes me not you are my silly long narratives which sail just beyond the last hope of wind. What makes you not me is your sense of direction, ever envied by a compass and not open to recalculating. What makes me not you is my memory of all words, any utterance shared in conflict, then tattooed deep within.
well, I love that sculpture. It's right outside City Hall
Right.
in our parking lot, and I loved your poem. But the judge, that's the thing is I I become it. This is why I don't judge these contests because I come at it from the perspective of a program coordinator, and I have attachments and things like that. So I really do depend on the blind reading of someone who is completely just looking at the words.
You know what? It's not about the winning. Really, it's not about the winning.
Right.
It's about being inspired to write. And I thank you and HighlandParkPoetry.org to give me the inspiration, because now, even though the contest is over, I am going to look at some of the other sculptures, and I am going to use them to inspire some more writing.
Oh,
because
great.
why
Good.
not? I mean, really, that's really what this is about. It's about sharing with other people, but it's also about feeding our own creativity and imagination. And I think prompts of any kind really are helpful. They really do
great.
stimulate the
Good.
writing juices.
Well, I do want to get back to your other dog park poem. I think it's okay.
Okay.
It's all right.
It's all right. We'll surprise some people. Okay. Hopefully the artist, the sculptor. Okay. At the Dog Beach Park. Well, Senor Neary, I am glad you had no title for Luca number 4, whatever that means. A stone woman with no arms for hugging, no head to store her brains, no face to express her feelings, no mouth to speak, no lips to kiss, no eyes to search, but plenty of ass to grab and breasts to squeeze. Thanks for capturing a woman from the male point of view. You probably never thought she would talk back to you and let you have it. Neither did I. What an inspiration. And the sculpture is from the bottom of the neck to about the knees.
Right.
And that's it. And no arms, no head. So it's a...
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that you, and the other poem that was selected, which is by Gail Gepfert, who she lives in Palatine, and she is also a very talented photographer, and she contributed to our website and to the chapbook that we're publishing, fabulous photos. Her perspective on that piece was very, very different.
Very
It was
different.
just, but so I liked that we were getting completely different imaginations responding to the art. I, of course, realized as we were talking that I contributed 2 poems myself. I did not bring either
Your
of my
own
poems.
poems.
I didn't bring my own poems, so I was so focused on.
Well, I submitted 5 poems and came out a winner 4 times. And my
Amazing.
favorite poem is the poem that didn't win.
Yeah.
And it was about the Blue Horse
Oh, yes.
at Ravinia
yes,
train station.
Right.
And so there you have it.
And I ended up writing a poem about a sculpture that's in Ravinia Park before I realized which sculptures were part of the contest. I thought, I've always loved this sculpture. And I stood there and I wrote a poem, and then I thought, it's not part of this contest. But see, I was inspired anyway.
Well, hey,
Because
the
the
thing is-
city doesn't own that one.
I know.
Ravinia,
I know.
Ravinia Festival does.
I'm a sneak preview for the future. I am thinking about, the chapbook that's coming out, it's going to be available for people to purchase on Amazon.com, but it's called Art Gets in Your Eyes,
Oh,
and
cool.
it's Poets Respond to Highland Park's Public Art. I'd like to do a Art Gets in Your Eyes Volume 2,
Oh, I think
and we'll
that's
maybe
great.
do another show probably in a couple of years. But I'd like to invite, because there are many businesses and private homeowners and even some new sculptures in the city that might be interested. So in that case, we would have to create our own map, photograph the art and say these ones are included. But I think it would be a good idea.
I love that. I think it's
Very
a great
good.
So,
idea.
and I know, right, Ravinia does have tons.
Ravinia has so many
tons
beautiful
of,
sculptures.
Yeah, wonderful art in
Really.
Ravinia.
And then also on, just even on Central Avenue, we've got the, the butterflies fountain. We've got
Benches,
the
the-
bench, all
yeah,
kinds
there's
of
so
stuff.
many
So
different pieces.
there's lots of stuff that we can do. And then just as a sneak preview for people who are interested in these kinds of contests, Highland Park Poetry is pleased to announce